Well, it's official. I have severed all ties with Adobe. I've ended an almost 40-year relationship.
It almost feels like the entire world of corporate America and big tech is trying to speedrun its way into absolutely pissing off its entire customer base.
It's no secret that I'm not the biggest Adobe fan. Even though Photoshop is like my lifeblood, it's one of the first programs I got good at and is largely responsible for me being here today. I'm so happy to not be using it anymore.
Why are creators turning their back on Adobe? What's pushing people to walk away from the tools they've relied for years? If you search leaving Adobe here on YouTube, you'll see countless videos of frustrated users saying, "I'm done." So what's happening here? Adobe used to be the gold standard for creatives, and whether you're a designer, photographer, or filmmaker, it was the go-to choice. But now it seems like people have had enough. The question is why? What's causing this mass exodus from a company that once had the creative community wrapped around its finger? Let's dive into what went wrong and how Adobe is losing the trust of its users. For the longest time, Adobe was the creative king. If you wanted to edit photos, you opened Photoshop. If you needed to design a logo or make cool vector art, it was Illustrator to the rescue. And if you were an aspiring filmmaker or just trying to cut a YouTube video without pulling your hair out, you probably turned to Premiere Pro. Adobe's tools weren't just popular, they were everywhere. It didn't matter if you were a pro working for an ad agency or a hobbyist slapping filters on your dog photos, Adobe had you covered. In a way, Adobe ran the creative world. They didn't just follow the trends, they made them. Knowing your way around Photoshop or Premiere Pro wasn't just a skill, it was like a secret handshake in the creative community. You weren't a real designer or filmmaker until you could throw around phrases like export it as PNG or mask that out in After Effects. The magic really happened when Adobe started building their apps into a creative suite. One subscription got you access to Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, After Effects, InDesign, and a bunch of other tools that most of us never even opened but felt cool owning. It felt like Adobe was giving us creative superpowers. And the community? Oh man, it was thriving. Adobe's forums, YouTube tutorials, and design blogs were full of people sharing tips, tricks, and shortcuts. There was always some clever new way to use the pen tool that blew your mind. Plus, Adobe threw big events like Adobe Max every year, where they showed off new features and made you believe this was going to be the year your creative dreams would come true. Honestly, it was hard to compete with Adobe. Sure, some apps like CorelDRAW and Apple's Final Cut Pro tried to sneak into the game, but they just couldn't hang. Adobe was too far ahead. Before you knew it, every school was teaching Adobe, every job listing demanded it, and the creative world revolved around it. For years, Adobe wasn't just software, it was the software. Whether you were designing billboards, editing wedding videos, or just making memes, you probably used Adobe to do it. Everyone was in the same boat, and it felt like we'd be using Adobe forever. But of course, nothing lasts forever. Companies get too comfortable, start pushing their lucks, and forget what made people love them in the first place. It's like they think, we are untouchable, what could go wrong? For Adobe, the overconfidence started to show in 2013, and the cracks in their golden reputation slowly began to spread. In 2013, they ditched the old way of doing business, where you could buy Photoshop once and keep it forever like some prized possession. Instead, they rolled out Creative Cloud, a subscription model. Now, if you wanted to edit a picture or design a logo, you had to pay every month. No more one-time purchases. You want Photoshop? That's $20 a month. You want full suite? Hope your wallet's ready. At first, people hated it. Social media blew up with complaints and creative clung to their old version of the software, refusing to upgrade. There was something comforting about knowing you could open Photoshop CS6 10 years later and still get the job done. But Adobe? Nah, they were done with the model. They wanted those sweet recurring payments. Over time, most of us begrudgingly accepted it. I mean, the subscription did came with a few perks: automatic updates, cloud storage, access to new features, and seamless integration between apps. And since every company, school, and art program was jumping on board, it became the new norm. For many, it was like joining a gym. Annoying at first, but eventually you just kinda roll with it. But let's be real, the frustration never really went away. The idea of paying forever started to get under people's skin. You couldn't just skip a version or two to save money like in the old days. Now you had to pay month after month, whether you were actively using the software or not. It started to feel like a trap. And the worst part, if you ever wanted to leave Creative Cloud, things got Well, let's say complicated. That's when the first cracks started to show. Users been realizing they were stuck in Adobe's world. Canceling the subscription? Not so easy. Freelancers in particular felt the pinch, many of them juggling tight budgets and only needing software every now and then. Adobe had one more unpleasant surprise waiting for them. So you finally had enough of Adobe. You're ready to cancel the subscription and cut your losses. Should be easy, right? Wrong. That's when Adobe hit customers with a curveball. Cancellation fees. If you tried to cancel early, you'd get slapped with a fee, 50% of the remaining subscription cost. Talk about adding insult to injury. This didn't sit well with anyone, especially not freelancers and small businesses already struggling to make ends meet. Imagine paying for software you barely use only to find out that canceling costs even more. Suddenly, Adobe's tools started to feel less like a creative playground and more like a expensive hotel where checking out was nearly impossible. And the cancellation process? Let's just say it wasn't exactly user-friendly. People had to jump through hoops, digging through menus, chatting with customer services, and sometimes even arguing just to stop the payments. It was like trying to quit a gym membership where the manager keeps offering one more free month if you stick around. The backlash came fast and hard. Social media lit up with frustrated posts, angry rants, and meme roasting Adobe. Reddit threads popped up with people sharing their horrible stories about canceling. Even influencers and YouTubers got in on the action, warning their followers to read the fine print before signing up. Adobe's reputation, once a shiny and untouchable, started to take some serious hits. Things got so bad that even FTC, America's consumer watchdog, stepped in. They accused Adobe of not being upfront about their cancellation fees and called out the company for making it way too hard for customers to leave. Not exactly the kind of headline Adobe wanted. For a company that relied so heavily on customer loyalty, this was a big mistake. The fallout pushed more creatives to explore alternatives like Fairy Day, the DaVinci Resolve, and Canva, which all started to gain ground. Adobe had gone from being the beloved creative giant to feeling like a pushy landlord who wouldn't let you move out. In the end, the whole mess showed one thing. People don't like being trapped. And when you build a business around creatives, trust is everything. Once you lose the trust, it's hard to get it back. If you are still clinging to your older trusty Photoshop CS6 like it was a rare Pokemon card, Adobe had some bad news for you. It's time to let it go. They started phasing out older software versions, essentially forcing everyone to hop onto the Creative Cloud subscription model. Even if you already paid hundreds of dollars for these older versions, they were becoming unusable, meaning you either subscribed or say goodbye to your favorite tools forever. For long-term users, this was a tough pill to swallow. It felt like Adobe was saying, we appreciate your loyalty, but that's not enough. Now pay us forever. But why exactly did Adobe decide to kill off these older versions? Let's think about from Adobe's point of view. Technical challenges and compatibility issues. Keeping those older versions alive was like trying to keep an old flip phone running in a world of smartphones. The software wasn't optimized for the latest operating system and hardware, leading to crashes, bugs, and error message. For Adobe's developers, maintaining all these versions was logistically a nightmare. With every new Mac or Windows update, they'd have to issue patches for old software, and frankly, that's expensive and time-consuming. Let's be real, the older Adobe products were like candy to software pirates. Cracked versions of Photoshop and Premiere were floating all over the internet, costing Adobe a fortune. Switching to the subscription model with more control over updates and access was their way of tightening the leash. Phasing out older versions was also a not so subtle push to get everyone on Creative Cloud. Adobe wanted all users under one roof where they could guarantee steady revenue through subscription. And hey, while you're here, why not enjoy automatic updates and cloud storage too? Adobe's decision to pull the plug on older versions hit loyal users right in the feels. Some of these folks had been with Adobe since the pre-Instagram era, buying every new version with the hope that they'd own it for life. Now they were being told that ownership, that's no longer a thing. For many users, this felt like a betrayal. Professionals who had relied on Adobe for years began looking for alternatives, not because they wanted to, but because they felt forced to. Imagine spending years perfecting your workflow only to wake up one day and find out that your favorite version of Photoshop is suddenly obsolete. Many creatives knew the quirks of older tools like the back of their hand, every shortcut, every trick. Upgrading to newer versions wasn't always smooth sailing. Some users encountered bugs, others had to relearn new interfaces, and many found that their old plugins no longer worked. It was like being asked to change the tires on your car while speeding down the highway. Not everyone needs the latest and greatest features Adobe has to offer. For freelancers and small businesses, older versions worked just fine. Forcing them to switch was like making someone buy a sports car when all they really needed was a bicycle. And let's not forget, subscriptions weren't cheap. Suddenly users were paying up for features they didn't need, with no option to just stick with what they had. Phasing out older versions created an opening for competitors. Apps like Affinity Photo, DaVinci Resolve, and Canva swooped in to offer no subscription alternatives, attracting frustrated Adobe users. Even open source tools like GIMP and Blender started gaining traction. People were willing to sacrifice some features just to escape from Adobe's ecosystem. Schools and universities were hit hard when it relied on older Adobe versions to teach students, and the sudden shift to subscriptions strained their budgets. Some programs even had to cut back on license, leaving students without access to the tools they needed. Students in return started looking for other options, or worse, resorted to pirated software just to keep up with their coursework. Adobe's tools, once a gateway to creativity, were now becoming a barrier. Another problem with Creative Cloud was the reliance on internet connectivity. The old versions, they run just fine without it. But now users in remote areas or those who constantly on the go found themselves at a disadvantage. Not everyone has access to fast, reliable internet, especially freelancers who travel frequently. For those users, Adobe's shift felt more like a step backwards than forward. Constantly pushing users to upgrade also took a toll on the environment. Newer software demanded higher system requirements, forcing users to replace perfectly functional hardware just to keep up. This didn't sit well with the environmentally conscious creatives, who saw Adobe's approach was wasteful and unsustainable. So how did the community react to all these changes? The internet exploded with complaints, long-time users felt betrayed, with many saying things like, "I've been using Photoshop since 2005 and now I have to rent it?" Hashtags like Adobe Fail trended on Twitter, and forums were flooded with posts about the frustration of losing access to the older version. Freelancers and small businesses were particularly vocal. For them, the subscription fees add up fast, and with no option to use older software, many felt cornered. Some users held on to their old versions for as long as possible, running outdated apps on ancient computers just to avoid switching. The good news? This whole fiasco gave other platforms a chance to shine. Affinity, DaVinci, and Canva welcomed Adobe refugees with open arms, offering easy-to-use, no subscription tools. Even open-source software like GIMP and Blender saw a surge in downloads, proving that creatives were willing to embrace new tools if it meant breaking free from Adobe's grip. And there you have it, a classic example of how a company's attempt to control its users backfired spectacularly. Adobe thought they were future-proofing their business. Instead, they ended up driving away the very community that made them a creative powerhouse in the first place. The great AI controversy. Because of course, what's a modern tech company without a little scandal involving artificial intelligence? Creators suddenly notice a sneaky little detail in Adobe's terms of services. By using their tools, they were agreeing to let Adobe use their work to train its AI. Yep, that means your digital masterpiece, whether it's a cute cat illustration or a complex design project, could secretly be feeding Adobe's AI brain without so much as a "Hey, you cool with this?" For a lot of artists, this was a huge deal. Their creations weren't just random doodles. They were part of their personal brand, their livelihood, and sometimes their heart and soul. To hear that Adobe could take their work and use it to enhance AI without explicit permission felt like a betrayal. It's one thing to pay for subscription, but finding out your work might be repurposed without credit or payment? That's a whole new level of frustration. There are a couple of reasons to feel like it was a slap in the face. For many artists, their work is their identity. Knowing that Adobe could use their content in a way that didn't otherwise made people feel powerless. To add insult to injury, creators weren't getting compensated for AI training or even credited. Some creators were worried that their unique style might end up replicated by AI tools, diminishing the value of their work. Imagine seeing something eerily similar to your art in Adobe's AI-generated content. Awkward, right? So what did Adobe do to control the damage? Once the backlash hit, Adobe quickly tried to backpedal. They made vague promises to adjust their terms of services and give users more control over how their work was used. But by then, the trust had already started to crumble. The message was clear: "We're sorry you noticed." Even with these adjustments, people were skeptical. The creative community is tight-knit, and word spread fast. Some users started looking for software that wouldn't put them in this awkward position, where they felt like both a paying customer and a data supplier. This controversy wasn't just a bump in the road for Adobe. It was another sign that the company might be prioritizing profits over people. The AI feature, in theory, could have been a powerful tool to help creators, but Adobe's lack of transparency turned it into a PR nightmare. Instead of empowering users, it left them wondering, can I trust Adobe with my work? This incident also fueled more conversations about ethics in AI. Users began asking tough questions, like, should company be allowed to use customers' data to train AI without clear upfront consent? How can artists protect their work in an increasingly AI-driven industry? In the end, this was just one more reason why creators began to lose faith in Adobe. Sure, AI is cool, but not when it feels like a sneaky roommate borrowing your stuff without asking. And for many, this whole fiasco was just further proof that Adobe had lost touch with the creative community it once championed. So where does Adobe go from here? Sure, they've promised to tweak their policies and make it easier to cancel subscription. But let's be real, will that actually be enough? It feels like slapping a band-aid on a broken arm, right? Meanwhile, the competition is circling like sharks. We've got Affinity and even some open source heroes like GIMP making big moves. They're winning over the creative crowd with flexible pricing and features that didn't require you to sign your life away. And let's not forget, Adobe's reputation has taken a serious hit. People aren't just annoyed, they're genuinely rethinking their loyalty. If Adobe wants to stay on top, they need more than a quick fix. It's about rebuilding trust and actually listening to what creatives want. That could mean adding more flexible subscription options, offering better customer support. Seriously, we've all been on hold for hours. Or maybe even, brace yourself, lowering prices. The real question is, can Adobe turn things around before it's too late? If they make meaningful changes, they could totally win back the crowd. But if not, well, there are plenty of alternatives just waiting to take their place. It's make or break time, Adobe. No pressure though. So what do you think? Is Adobe about to pull off a comeback, or are they slowly fading into the background? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious to see where everyone stands.